What has happened with the Dobbs case?
We have Roe versus Wade overruled, as well as Casey.
Oh, my gosh.
I don't think I ever thought I would see this day, to be honest with you. But it's a good day.
We have talked about this. We have been together for 25 years, and we both said never in our lifetime would this happen.
Nope. I didn't.
Oh, my gosh.
It's being widely...
Lord, please hear the voice of your people. We are trying to mend our ways. We are sorry it has taken us this long, but please hear your people. Please forgive us for what we have done. My gosh. Is the ruling, does it look to be the same as the original Alito ruling?
I'm just going through it now. It does seem to be a 6-3 decision, which is, there was a question of whether Roberts would come on board for this. Looks like he has. So, does seem to be a 6-3 decision.
Just let that sink in, America. What Ruth Bader Ginsburg said. Ruth Bader Ginsburg said that this was unjustly and decided, Roe versus Wade. She thought it was flawed. And it was. The idea that abortion is covered in the Constitution is not true. It is not true. And everything that is not in the Constitution doesn't make it unconstitutional. It just means it goes to the states to decide. That is the law of the land and has been forever. Even Justice Ginsburg said that.
The relevant portion here at the end of the opinion, we end this opinion where we began. Abortion presents a profound moral question. The Constitution does not prohibit the citizens of each state from regulating or prohibiting abortion. Roe and Casey arrogated that authority. We now overrule those decisions and return that authority to the people and their elected representatives. The judgment of the Fifth Circuit is reversed, and the case is remanded for further proceedings consistent with this opinion. It is so ordered.
Wow. Okay. Our producers need to be watching the White House and all others who are going to come out in a statement. This means Jane's revenge is going to be, at least what they say, is they are going to be lighting cities on fire tonight. I'm prayerful that doesn't happen, but I wouldn't doubt it. The media is going to stir things up like there is no tomorrow. But we can beg the Lord for peace and protection on all sides. I think it is so important to know that we have to be on God's side because he's not picking sides. He doesn't. He loves all of his children equally. And we just try to do what he wants us to do. So pray for all of those who are terrified about what this means, all those who are, I think, misguided. and pray for peace to wash over us. I doubt. Well, I'm not going to. I have no idea what the Lord wants. Whatever the Lord wants, we'll deal with it. All right. Would you make sure that we have talked to Levitt's office, and if we can, we'll do it on the bottom of the hour. My apologies to him. I don't mean to be rude, but sorry.
I hope we can prioritize his local race over the Dobbs decision. Glenn, I don't understand why you didn't do that. It was really rude of you to cut him off in the middle of that. I mean, what could you possibly be talking about? Only tens of millions of children potentially are on the road to living instead of not being alive. But I want to make sure he gets his words in here because I know that was a high priority to him. So we'll get back to him as soon as possible. I'm glad he prioritized that. It's a really important moment for him to make that personal argument, and I'm glad he made it.
I don't care. Can we get? Let me. I'm sorry, but we don't have another. We don't have a break long enough. Can we get analysis on bottom of this hour? Because if we get analysis on this hour, if they have time to read it, get analysis on, and then move David to the next hour. If we can't get analysis because they haven't had time to read it yet, then let's. I'm sorry. I'm just shocked that this came out. We were just having this conversation before we went on the air, and Stu said, "What are you going to do if the Dobbs case comes out?" And I said, "It's not going to come out." And he said, "But if it comes out," and I said, "It's not going to come out, but if it does, we have to take that." So I'm just shocked because I did not expect that to happen.
Yeah, Glenn, we're going to read one excerpt here from the ruling. "We do not pretend to know how our political system or society will respond to today's decision overruling Roe and Casey. And even if we could foresee what will happen, we would have no authority to let that knowledge influence our decision." Gosh, if that is not the central problem with the Supreme Court so often. So glad they pointed that out. "We can only do our job, which is to interpret the law, apply long-standing principles of stare decisis, and decide this case accordingly. We therefore hold that the Constitution does not confer a right to abortion, period. Roe and Casey must be overruled, and the authority to regulate abortion must be returned to the people and their elected representatives."
It is the best of times. It is the worst of times. We're going to see miracles in our lifetime, and I think we just saw one.
The court writes, "The precedents should be respected, but sometimes the court errs, and occasionally the court issues an important decision that is egregiously wrong. When that happens, stare decisis is not a straitjacket." This is something, of course, we've been arguing for decades, and seemingly is obvious, as you point out. I mean, even Ruth Bader Ginsburg supported this at one point in her career. Many liberal, court watchers feel the same way. This is not a conservative. There's a lot of passion for conservatives on the pro-life side of this, and there's very little appetite for that on the left. However, there is appetite for this being terrible law and an egregiously poor decision made when Roe versus Wade was initially, decided. And so the left has been on board with this, not to say we shouldn't have abortion, which again, this is not what this does. And it's important to remember that overturning Roe versus Wade does very little to stop abortion in this country. It's a very important first step.
It won't.
But it will. Anyone who wants to get an abortion in this country will still be able to get them. This is why the work that, we've talked about some of these organizations we've worked with is so important. It's about still changing hearts and minds. This will not do it on its own, but it is an important step.
So do you remember when I was at Fox and I was talking about why it was so important to be good, be steady, don't fight back the way they want you to fight back? Because Martin Luther King was right. When you put good versus evil side by side, the American people will know it, and they will recognize it, and they will see it. A lot of Americans have been duped, and a lot of Americans, it's very, very difficult. You learn this from the history of Germany and other places. Once you decide and you've gone so far mentally down the road, it takes a huge amount of courage to say, holy cow, I was wrong about this and switch sides. But I think you're going to see states, California, New York, they are going to become abortion mills. They are going to do abortion vacations. They are going to push the limits as far as they're going to say, if it's up to the state, you will see laws in some states that say after a baby is born, you can kill it. They've done it already in Chicago. They've done it illegally in Chicago. They talked about it in Virginia. They're going to do it in New York. They're going to do it in California. Believe me. And this will be the place where I think a lot of Americans will have to decide, can I live in a state like that? Can I be part of that? This is so far, this will become so far over the edge that most Americans will be appalled by what is happening. Even those who believe that they want to have reasonable limits to abortion, they will not find it reasonable what these death states will do. Josh Hammer, he is the opinion editor of Newsweek. He is the host of the Josh Hammer Show. He is really quite brilliant, one of the leading minds in the conservative movement, I think. Josh Hammer joins us now to tell us, what did you find in this decision?
Glenn, great to be back with you on such a momentous and really is emotionally powerful day, honestly. So, look, as you said, this dropped recently. Funny enough, I was in the middle of giving a guest lecture for an organization. I'm on the advisory board of when it dropped. So I barely had any time to kind of skim through here, let alone get to the concurring and dissenting opinions. But it looks like this looks very similar to the draft opinion that was leaked by the Politico story a month and a half ago in early May. And I think those of us who were praying that the 5 justices from this leaked draft majority opinion would have the fortitude to stiffen their spines against this unprecedented assault now know that our prayers were answered, Glenn. That's really my takeaway right now. This looks a lot like the leaked opinion. Justice Thomas and Justice Kavanaugh have some brief concurring opinions, but unbelievable. And really just holding aside the constitutional law stuff for a second here, just speaking as pro-lifers, on a day like today, I think we really just need to pause. And I tweeted this out earlier. We need to just be grateful for our half century of pro-life activist forebears who, this issue could have gone away after 1973. That was a long time ago, 1973. I mean, this issue could have just gone away. We owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to the pro-life moral activists, political activists, and of course, yes, the legal activists who fought day in and day out to make sure that this grave injustice stayed front and center of our national political conscience. And in many days, today is the culmination of a half century of fighting for truth and justice. But in many ways, it's also a new beginning for the pro-life fight as well, interestingly.
How do you mean a new beginning for the fight? I think it's going to turn, I think we're going to see abortion turn even darker in those states that allow it. Is that what you're meaning by this?
Well, look, for a half century now, Roe versus Wade and its progeny, specifically the Planned Parenthood versus Casey case of 1992, they took away from the states, obviously. They arrogated authority away from the states, the ability to attempt to nationally codify one view of the morality of abortion. It happened to be a profoundly immoral view. So the fight now shifts to the states. And the pro-life activists in all the 50 states, especially obviously in red states, purple states, admittedly some blue states like New York and California probably won't be able to touch them there. But we have to make sure that our side is well positioned in the state capitals for every red, purplish, and probably even light blue state to make sure that we fight for successful, cogent, and morally consistent pro-life legislation. the state of Oklahoma, actually, just north of Texas, where I know you are, Glenn, they've been leading on this, actually. Governor Kevin Stitt signed into law a fantastic pro-life bill there in Oklahoma a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago or so at this point, that basically just bans abortion straightforward from conception. And there are some, obviously life of the mother exceptions and so forth, but we really need to start thinking about trying to craft legislation now at the state level. But to your point, yes, I do fear, of course, that blue states will only double down in their radicalism. And unfortunately, that's probably only going to lead to an ever greater divide in our country than we currently have today. But obviously, we're going to save, at the end of the day here, we're going to save millions and millions of unborn children. We are going to save human beings who can grow up to cure cancer, who can win Nobel Prizes. I mean, this is just a tremendous win for the human species. I don't really know how to say it than that.
I tell you, I saw the stat that I think it was last year or the year before, 20% of all pregnancies ended in abortion. 20%.
Wow.
That's a shocking number. And we do have our work cut out for us because I think that these states are going to double down. But I think, God doesn't waste anything. There is no waste with God. Even the worst things that could possibly happen turn out to be something good. You know what I mean? You're like, holy cow, how did that just happen? And I think that evil is going to fully come unmasked. I mean, I'm telling you, Josh, I don't know how you feel about this. I think this could be the day of America's Kristallnacht. I can see these pro-life centers being burned to the ground today. They're calling for a night of rage around the country. I mean, I think evil is going to show itself, and that'll scare the American people. Hopefully.
I've been thinking about this a lot this week, actually, because I've been bracing for kind of a new George Floyd Summer of Love kind of thing happening this summer, coming to a city or a suburb near you, unfortunately, myself. Look, I live in Florida, Glenn. I know you live in Texas. It is a moment like this where I do think that where you live matters, and who your mayor is, who your governor is, matters. Because law and order and, rioting and anarchy is not really a federal issue. I mean, it is to a limited extent. I mean, in June 2020, Tom Cotton wrote this op-ed that was pretty controversial at the time. I happen to agree with it, where he said, quote unquote, send in the troops. And there is some federal legislation from the Reconstruction era that would justify that. But most kind of quelling and quashing of anarchy does happen, constitutionally speaking, at the state and local level. So at a moment like this, where I fear that you are probably not wrong, I take some solace that Governor DeSantis is my governor. I think Texans, should take some solace that they are represented by a Republican governor and state legislature there as well. So I fear that you are right. I pray, obviously, that no one is harmed. I mean, I fear, though, that something bad is happening. And at the end of the day, of course, that does not mean the justices cannot do what they are supposed to do. So thank God they did that.
So, Josh, have you looked into what the White House has been saying? The White House yesterday, in fact, I think, do we have a clip of this, what the White House said yesterday about the guns, and then they were turned to the SCOTUS ruling for Roe versus Wade? Do we have that, please?
Will the president accept this decision as legitimate, even if he disagrees with it?
It's going to come from the Supreme Court, so it's going to be a decision that we certainly are going to respond to. So I'll leave it at that. I mean, it's just like any other Supreme Court decision, just like the one that they did today on guns.
So the White House won't say that they're going to accept it, which I don't think they will. They're talking now about taking doctors and moving them into places like Oklahoma or Texas, where abortions will be outlawed, and putting doctors on our military bases to perform abortions. I mean, where does this go when you have a government that is in defiance of one branch of the government?
So there's a lot to unpack here. So we should start from first principles. The idea of judicial supremacy, and this is a peculiar thing to say on a day like today where such a pro-life victory has happened, admittedly. But if we're going to be intellectually consistent here, the idea of judicial supremacy, the idea that the justices have the sole and exclusive ability to interpret the Constitution for themselves and no other constitutional actor in Article 1 or Article 2, let alone the states, has the ability to independently interpret it, that is erroneous. In fact, actually, it was really Abraham Lincoln, actually, who in the Dred Scott case famously opposed judicial supremacy and flouted the Dred Scott ruling, at least as it pertained to everyone other than Dred Scott himself. So I have actually argued in formal legal scholarship and in a law review article, actually, that the Lincolnian view of how each branch of government should interpret the Constitution for itself in its own ambit is correct. Having said that, there is a thing called prudence, and there's a thing called comedy. And in a moment like today, when it really does look like, and I agree with you that we are now bracing for riots through the streets, when the political rhetoric is at DEFCON 1, when people are trying to assassinate Supreme Court justices, I think it would be, at a bare minimum, a profoundly imprudent act for the Biden administration to try to undermine this ruling. Now, what they might do is they might try to kind of issue some kind of limp executive orders or issue some regulations that might try to kind of undermine it at the edges here. But at the end of the day, the idea that this returns to the states, there's not really a whole lot they can do about that. I mean, basically, at this point, if red states throughout the country, Kentucky, West Virginia, Kansas, whatever, if they want to go ahead and ban abortion, what can the Biden administration literally do about that? I mean, short of sending in the National Guard to protect Planned Parenthood if the state legislature of Kentucky goes ahead and bans it, there's really not a whole lot they can do. And it's very difficult to envision a world in which the Biden administration literally sends in troops to red states to protect Planned Parenthood if that state legislature goes ahead and bans it. So practically speaking, this is like a lot of tough talk and rhetoric. This obviously is a campaign year in 2022. So there's really not a whole lot that, practically speaking, they can do to actually prevent red and purple states from enacting pro-life legislation.
I'm glad to hear that. I know that they have been working on things. I mean, he has said, there's executive orders that I can employ. There are things that I can do. He's talked about a national public health emergency, which I think is crazy. But I would hope that the president would come out today and say, we strongly disagree with this. And you're right. The court is not the end all. But the court did not end abortion. It just said the people should decide. I think that's the best kind of court ruling on any of it. The people should decide what this is and send it back to the states.